Hi there, it's Sheila with Designs of Baby Minute, and I'm going to show you a little bit more in SewWhat-Pro how to make a border around an image so that you can either make it a personalized tag or you want a border because you're going to use it as a patch or something. But I wanted to show you a couple of things that I have found in the software. Maybe this will make it a little bit easier for you. So I've already pulled in some lettering. I'm using some fonts by Designs by Juju. The one on the top is called Carried Away. That's in green. The one in the middle is called Willow. That's the one in blue, and the one on the bottom is called Collegiate. I like all of them. They all sew out very well, but they have different looks about them. So, and they do different things when you add a border. So that's what I wanted to show you. So, for what I do, most of all, I make personalized tags. So let's add some bean stitch borders around each of these words and see what happens. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is select the first one over in the thread chart, and I'm going to click the Add Border tool. So the Add Border will add a border just to this object over here. I like to use the Auto Border feature. I've got my Auto Border set at 28, which is 2.8 millimeters. It doesn't matter what any of these over here, because those are all settings for different kinds of borders, not this outline border. Now, if I was going to use a satin outline, all of a sudden this would tell me how thick it was going to be, how far apart they were going to be. If I was going to use a shaped border right here, then I could put in I could just put in a square or a rectangle, and I could make the square 3.2 inches high, 3.2 inches wide. That's backwards. And or I could change these settings and make it 2 inches high and 4 inches wide or whatever. But that's what this side over here is for. This is for the thickness of the satin stitches. I don't use those a whole lot. So I'm going to go back to the bean outline. So the only part over here that matters is the stitch length for me, since I'm going to select an auto border. I like to keep my distance from the pattern at 3 millimeters. I have used 2, and so let me show you what happens. We're going to play with this number right here, and then we're also going to play with the edit stitches function, because there are some things that happen with SewWhat-Pro. Okay, so let's click auto border, 3 millimeters from the pattern, stitch length 28. Let's say OK. Okay, now it added me a little border around the stitch. Now, when I'm doing personalized tags, I usually don't do script lettering, and this is exactly the reason why. So that shape does follow the shape of the letters, but to me that's not a very pleasing pattern. So you could do 2 things here. So if you were making this into a tag, let me go ahead and change the hoop size real quick. If you were making this into a tag, you could do this. You could sew the lettering in one color, and then you could use the outline and the tab part that you might apply in the same color to match the background, the material that you're using. So if I was doing this on white fabric, I might sew this outline stitch out in white. And what that does, it still gives you the same stitched look, but it's not as prominent. So when I do mine, I usually do the outline stitch the same color as I've stitched the lettering out in and the tab. And so it has this neat little stitched look to the whole thing. But if I don't like the shape of the border, then I might change the border color and the tab part so that it's less jarring. Does that make sense? So there's less contrast there. So just the words stand out. So this is something else. Let's take this border off. I'm going to change it so you can see it back again. Let's change it to gray. And let's do a different border. Okay, so we're going to go in here, back to the border tool. I left that one there because I want you to see the difference. And I'm going to change the distance from the pattern. I'm going to do an auto border, but I'm going to make it just a little bit further out. And I'll show you what's going to happen when I do that. Let's click OK, and let's look at this border now. Okay, so you can see as the border gets farther out, it makes less dips in between the letters. And less dips, for me, feels better. That looks better to me. Now, I still don't like this dip right here between the you know, the B and the U, I mean B and the L where it's dipping down to the U. And I don't like this dip over here. So what you might do instead, if your script has a lot of flourishes like that, and I suspect it'll do the same thing on that second Bulldogs in the Willow script, it'll do the same thing. So let's go back to the border tool. Oh, you know what? Let me select that again. Let's go over to the border tool. Let's get a shape. Okay, so there are all these different shapes that you could pick to apply to this this tag, and let's pick something real simple. Let's pick a rounded outline rectangle. Now, if you look over here, what you've got selected is the shape of the thing. Now, I know that I used a 3/4 inch font, so I want the height of my tag. Oops, let's see. I want it to be about 1 inch. So let's change the height to about 1 inch. You know what? Let's do 1.25 just for good measure. And then if I had my grid turned on, I would know that this is a 5-inch wide space here. It doesn't quite take up all of it. So let's make it 3.5. That's just a guess. We can always go back and change it. And so we're going to do that shape border. We're going to keep the same 28 stitch length. And we're going to click, I'm being stitched still, and we're going to click OK. Where did it put it? Oh, it put it down there. Okay, so it made a nice rectangle down here. Let's go get it. Okay, there's the rectangle that it made for us with rounded corners. Now you can see, let's place it over that, and I'm going to go ahead and move these two borders out of the way. We're not going to use them, so we're just going to move them out of the way. I want to keep them there so you can see them though. So we're going to move those up and out of the way. And let's see how Bulldogs fits in this rectangle. Well, that's not too bad. So what I might do with this is I might just take the edges and pull it out a little bit. Okay, so if I was going to redo this border, you know, delete this and start over, I would know that I needed to make it a little bit taller, but not much longer. That looks okay to me, to my eye. Now, I'm going to, on this version, so let's click off of it and see what that looks like. So that's a nice tag. That looks good. You might add a flourish or something under here, like a swoop. There are fonts that have a swoop built in, or you could use a letter like an L or an I from another design and put it right there. You got lots of options, but that looks pretty good. And so if I was gonna, and then I would add my tab over here, and I'd flip it so it fit the frame better. Let's look and see what happens when we do this next one. So I used the Willow script for this next tag, and I did something different. So the first thing that I did different is when I was adding the lettering in on the icons tab, I actually did the B, but then I scooted the U up a little bit so it's in the middle of the B. And so the baseline for this whole thing is really, I'm really using the baseline as what's under the letters following the capital letter. So this B is kind of more of a embellished look than just a straight script. So the reason I did that is because when I go to apply the border, you saw on this one how there was a big bump over here, and then it was not visually balanced. So there was more up here, there was some up here, and so from a visual, just a graphic standpoint, that's not balanced. It's kind of, your eye goes kind of like this across the shape instead of going like this and seeing the whole thing at once. When I do the embellished B, it's got this big swoop off the edge, and the S has the same swoop over here. Those swoops are kind of in the same place. The B descends just like the G descends, so it's underneath the baseline, and there is enough room. These kind of all match at the top a little bit. So I think it's going to look visually better when I put an auto border around the whole shape. So let's grab our auto border and let's see what happens. Okay, we're going to get an auto border. Let's go ahead and put it, you know, back to, I'm going to click on it. Put 3 from the rest of the pattern, bean outline, stitch length 28, and let's say okay. Okay, now look at that shape. So this shape is much more visually balanced, and I'm just talking about the outline here. I'm not talking about the lettering. It's much more balanced than this shape up here, either the one closer or farther away, because there's not a big, this still goes up because that S has an extra flourish at the end, so it brings the whole design up at the end. The B and the G are balanced at the front and the back of the word, and so it just looks better. And if I were putting my tab on, I'd put it here, and then I might actually bring it so that the tab started here and maybe ended here, which means I would have to take off some stitches or add some stitches to it so that it was exactly in the center of this lettering. But, you know, because that B has that flourish over there, one side of the tab, what I'd actually do is I'd bump it all the way to here. I can show you how to do that. And then, and take off stitches up at this point. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Let's go ahead and look at this last one. I think that looks fine to me. It would also fit in the rectangle. Let me move this border out of the way. And let's look and see how it looks in this rectangle that we did for the other Bulldogs tag. So let's put that rectangle right on top of it. I'm just clicking my mouse, selecting it, and pulling it down. Okay, so visually, you know, you see we could squish this down a little bit, and it would look fine. Okay, so that actually looks really nice. And that auto border, that shape is a really good shape for that. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do, yeah, so I think that looks fine in that size tag, that rounded rectangle tag too. But we made that other border. So let me put this back, move that back out there. And if we were going to use it on that one, see how it needs to be a little bit bigger to catch the bottom of that G. So let's do that. And then let's put this border back over on the Willow version. Okay. Move it down just a bit. And over just a bit. Down just a little bit more. That's not down, that's over. Let's try just right there. That should do it. Yep, that's good. Okay. Let's look at this last lettering for Bulldogs here. Now, this one, when you look at just the outline around this, you can see that it's mostly basically just a rectangle. So let's apply a border the same way we've done before, an auto border 3 millimeters from the pattern, stitch length 28. Let's see what happens there. Okay, now that border is actually pretty cool. I like that. I like the way it does not dip down in those gaps right there. It doesn't dip up over here. Let's do a border on it, and let's make it a little bit closer and see what happens. So let's do auto border at 2 millimeters away from the pattern, and I bet it's going to dip down a little bit. Yep, see it dip down. It dipped down a lot, actually. Let's isolate it so you can see it. So it dipped down, it rounded the edges around the back of the S. It went in a little bit around the B, although this border went in a little bit around the B between those serifs too. So it's not so bad, but it has pretty much a square corner here, a more squared off rounder over here and over here. So on that one, what I would do, sorry, my phone rang. On that one, what I would do is I'd probably do the rounded rectangle because, and I would probably change it. So if I turn my grid on, let's view the grid labels. From view, can I see the lines? I can't see the lines. I think I have to get off of here. Okay, now let's go back to view the grid lines, and we can actually measure how far this Bulldogs is. So it is in millimeters, which makes me crazy. No, it's not. It's in inches. Those are half inches. Okay. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 inches wide. So if we were going to make, and then it's 1 point, no, it's not quite 1 inch. So it's 3/4 of an inch still. So I would make a rounded rectangle border or a square rectangle border. I would make it 4 inches long and probably 1 inch wide. So let's do that and let's see what happens. Let's do you know what? Let's do a squared off square. So we're going to make it 4 inches wide and let's do 1.2 inches high. That's fine. And see what happens. Where did it put it? It put it up high. How weird. Okay, there's that rectangle. Now, it's a little bit close, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this one. Those are our two other Bulldogs borders, and get those out of the way, just so you can see that squared off rectangle that we just applied. Okay, so on this Bulldogs tag, hello, we don't know what's doing that. Hello. On that Bulldogs tag, what I would do is I would go over here to the end and I would pull it out a little bit this way to give it some room on this side, and then I'd pull it out over here a little bit and give it some room over here. Okay, that looks really good to me. I like that a lot. I think that's a very clean, nice look. So, just so I can show you all of the parts of what I do, I'm gonna move. Let's get rid of this grid because it bugs me and I can't see it very well. Okay, let's get rid of that grid. Let's get rid of these extra borders that we know we don't like. Let's get rid of, I don't really like this top one, so I'm going to get rid of that one. And I'm going to say I didn't really like that. I didn't like the borders that I put around it. So let's get rid of all of those and delete everything. So we're left with the, oh, there's one more. That was the rounded rectangle we tried. Okay, let's delete that. So now we're left with this one that I'm going to pull up here out of the way, and then this one right here, number 2, and their threads number 2 and 4. So before we go any further, I'll show you what I like to do. I like to actually move the threads together so that the ones that go with this one are together in order over here, and then the ones in the last one. So if I were doing a bunch of different names, or, you know, Bulldogs and different, if I was making a sample set for the Bulldogs team or whatever, and they wanted to see their things sewed out in different fonts, let's say, or maybe you have the word Bethany and the word Brittany, and they both want tags, and they want them in different colors. This is what I would do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move the outline for the top Bulldogs. I'm going to hit the Shift key and grab that number 3 and put it in the number 2 spot. Okay, so now I've got Bulldogs in blue and its border, and then I've got Bulldogs in green in the collegiate font and its border. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take Bulldogs in blue and its border and select those with the control key together, and then I'm going to rotate it so it's rotate it 90 degrees. So I'm using my 5x7 hoop because I'm going to sew these out probably on my PE 770, and then I'm going to go get the collegiate one in its border, and I'm going to rotate it too and put it up here. Now I'm going to put them a little bit away from each other because I want to make sure that I have plenty of room to cut around the edge. And technically when I'm cutting around it, as much room as I've given between the border and the lettering, I'm going to leave about the same amount of border when I cut it. So it's about 1/8 of an inch is what I like to cut. So there it is right there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my icons back on because I used these tabs earlier and they're still showing up in my icons menu. So you can see here's the tabs menu, and because I'm using SewWhat-Pro, it doesn't matter what format you grab because when you save your file, it'll save it all as one design. Anyway, so I have that in that tab file. They're all in different formats or in, you know, for different machines. So I'm going to go grab a pointed tab, and it's going to just put it in there right there, just like it would be lettering. And let's get rid of the icon so we can see it. So we're going to select the tab, and we're going to rotate it. We're going to hit this button twice, so it'll flip it 180 degrees. Ready? 1, 2, and then I'm going to drag it over here and put it right where I want it. Now, so I think I told you how I was going to try to put it right in the middle of the lettering so that it bumps up. And let's look and see what happens. So when we zoom in on that, we're going to zoom way in. We're going to wait for the computer to catch up because we're zooming. We are zooming. We're zooming in. We're zooming. Now we need to scoot over. Okay. We're still zooming. So I want you to be able to see what happens here. Okay, so when I put my tab in, there's a gap right here. We don't want a gap. So what I'm going to have to do is grab the tab, and I'm going to make the side where the gap is, I'm going to make that bump up against the border. And then I'll have too many stitches over here. So we have to edit those stitches out. So let's go to split pattern. And what we're going to do is we're going to split at stitch. Okay, so we might need to zoom in a little bit more so that we don't take out too many stitches or get them out of the way. So I'm just going to click on the last stitch to get the number for it, and I'm going to hit the delete key on my keyboard. And that's going to take out one. Now remember, this is a triple or bean stitch, so there's 2 or 3 stitch points in every stitch place you've put your cursor. So you may have to do it a couple of times. Now, I took out those 2 stitches and it put it right at the border. You may find that you may have to move some, so you could actually, we can move the stitch. You would hit Control Shift and grab the stitch with your mouse point and scoot it a little bit if you needed to. You could scoot it up. You could scoot it back away from the border. I like mine to touch the border, not go in and not be too far away. That looks good to me, and so I'm going to hit close and close again. So we've got that border. Now that'll stitch out, and this is visually balanced on this tag. And what I'll do next is I'm going to move thread number 5 and put it in the 3 position by hitting Shift and dragging it. So now these threads all belong to the same tag. So that's the Bulldogs, that's its outline, and that's its tab. Now the last thing that I like to do, just to make everything stitch out perfectly for me, is I like to select the border and the tab and make them both the same color. It doesn't matter what I tell the computer to do, because what I do over at the sewing machine will overrule everything. So I can make these purple and orange, but I'm going to sew it out in blue and gray or whatever, or I'm just going to use one color stitching. So, but I want my machine to stop between the blue. If I made these all the same color, then my machine wouldn't stop. It would just keep on going because it's sewing blue, blue, blue. So I want it to be a different color on here, even though I know I'm going to use all the same color over on my machine. So since I have these 2 selected at the same color, I'm going to go to Edit, Join Threads, Join Adjacent Threads of the same color because they're next to each other, and click OK. Now, they're both one. That is one thing. The border and the tab is all one thing. So let's do the same thing over here to the other Bulldogs. Now, we're going to have to go grab, let me have to zoom out so we can see where it puts it. So we're going to go back over to our lettering tab. We're going to see our icons that are open that we already opened, and I'm going to grab another tab. It's going to put it there. I'm going to close that so that I can see my threads over here on the side. And let's highlight that one, and let's rotate it twice so it turns it upside down. And then let's grab it with our mouse and drag it to where we want it. Now this is on a squared off rectangle, so we don't really have to do a whole lot of anything. And you can see I put it too far in, so there might be a drag inside there. Let's look at it real good and see. Yeah, I think I want to move it. I want to move it just a touch away from that line. Okay, that looks good. No? Okay, I can see there's still not quite right. Move it back just a tiny bit. And scoot it over just a bit. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, then what I'm going to do again is I'm going to select both the tab and the outline by hitting Control and selecting those threads with my mouse. And I'm going to pick a different color and select that. And those are both the same. So now I have the lettering and the outline. I'm going to go to Edit, Join Threads, Join Adjacent Threads of the same color, and OK. Okay. And that's it. So here's my finished file ready to go sew out. What I would do is I would send this to my USB or however you connect your computer to your machine. I'd put that file on the right thing. I'd put it in my machine and I would sew it out. I'd lay a piece of pleather. If I was going to do these in 2 different colors of pleather, I would lay a skinny one right here on this side of the hoop, sew it. So the wording, take the hoop off, apply the backing to the back so that the stitches aren't showing on the back from the lettering, and then I would put it back on my machine and run the outline and the tab. Then I would add a new piece of pleather over here for a different color tag and run the lettering on the top, take the hoop off the machine again, float another piece on the back to cover those stitches, and then run the outline and the tab on it. If I was doing these both on the same background fabric, maybe in different colors, I would take and I would put a piece of fabric down, and I would only put a skinny piece on the back of this one before I sewed out this one, so that you could get the backing here and then the backing here. If I was doing both of these in the same color, so let's say we're going to do both of those, we're going to select both of those, they're going to be the same color tag. So maybe we're going to do them in blue, on black, and you want to sew it all out at one time. So we can actually take and we can go to Edit, Join Threads, join threads of the same color. Those are the same color, starting at thread number 1. Let's join them. Okay, so what that'll do is that'll stitch out both bulldogs, the one in the willow script and the one in the collegiate script, at the same time. Then if you want to, then you could take the machine off, the hoop off the machine, and put your backing on the back and stitch the outlines at the same time if we change them both to the same color. So let's do that, and let's go to Edit, Join Threads, join the adjacent threads, and now we only have 2 steps. We have one for both words that we'll stitch when we floated our material on top, and then we have one for both outlines. So we would put backing on the hoop to cover where both of those are going to be. Now if you wanted to make sure, extra sure, you were going to cover up where all, make sure that this was long enough on the back, you could take step number 2 and select it and do a Control-C to copy it, click off in your hoop somewhere, and then a Control-V to paste it to get another run of that. Then you could take and select either number 2 or number 3 and put it in the number 1 position. So then what you would have is functionally you would have a placement stitch so that you could make the best use of your material and cut it exactly to the size you need. So you would have step number 1 would be a placement stitch, then you'd lay your material on top. Step number 2 would be your lettering, and then step number 3 is where you take the hoop off, float the backing on your hoop either with sticky spray or with tape, and then run the final outline stitch to get your tag done. So have fun. Go make some beautiful tags. Make them for your school, make them for your friends, make them to sell on Etsy, make them for your craft shows. But have fun. One thing I will say, and I feel like this is something the digitizers need to always say, or people that sell things need to always say, check the terms of use for any fonts that you've purchased to see if it's okay for you to make things to sell for other people. Some fonts that you buy, embroidery fonts, are for personal use only. They don't allow you to sell things with their fonts on it. And some will allow you to use their fonts to sell on finished goods that you have made with your sewing machine. There is not a digitizer that I have come across and that will allow you to take this design that you've made with their lettering and then sell the design. So please be careful. I have seen people claiming to be digitizers, and all they're doing is taking purchase fonts that they purchased from somewhere else, making designs like this in SewWhat-Pro, and then try to sell them on the internet. That is illegal, and so don't do it. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions, and go make some beautiful tags.